You need to go to online. Share screen.
Sorry. Not mental health issue.
Okay.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, seems all set.
Wait for. You take your mask off when you're speaking.
I'm going to.
Huh?
I'm gonna.
Okay.
I'm a little far enough away from you.
Okay. Okay.
Gargle with the stuff in the little bottle.
All right. Pardon?
Gargle with the stuff in the little bottle.
Oh no! Are you kidding me?
It was a
All right. We're going to get started in just a minute. This is the newcomers overview for IETF 114. So if you just, if you have not done this, you need to screen the QR code. This is the way we keep track of attendance in each meeting, and you'll get practice for it. We used to have these things called blue sheets, which was the way we kept track of who was in the room, and that's important for a number of reasons, actually. And because we are a standards process, we need to do that. So you'll see this at the entrance to every meeting this week and on the boards and things. So, and that way you are recorded as having been in the room for this particular discussion. And when you think about open standards, it's important to know who's in the room for the discussion. And one of the joys about being the first session is there's always last minute technical things. And as we go through this, feel free to go to the microphone if you have any questions. Any of you that are remote, you can feel free to put yourself in the virtual queue. I guess we should practice the queue methodology while we're here as well. So you need to use your phone to put yourself in the queue. And this will give us two advantages during the week. One, we won't have everybody lined up all crowded around the microphone for COVID reasons. And then the second one is it puts the physical attendees that are here in person on the same footing with the remote attendees. So everybody gets their chance, their choice in line. So are we good now? We're good? Great, thanks. So there's one other thing, and I meant to review it and stick a slide in the slides, and I didn't get it done, and that is the COVID policy, which is posted everywhere. So we do ask everybody, when you're in meeting rooms, to please wear a mask. When we're speaking, we're going to take it off to make it a little bit clearer, but we're pretty far away from you, and then we'll put it back on. So, so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So I welcome you to the newcomers overview. I am Karen O'Donohue. I have been participating in the IETF for a number of years. I have been an IETF chair, and I've been involved in the education, mentoring and outreach activities for a number of years as well. The I think, I don't think we have, yeah, next slide. I don't know that we have a clicker.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay, so next slide. So this is the overview of the presentation. We have it divided into 4 parts. We have these parts online as well that's a little bit outdated, and we're revising it. And we're going to pull out the meeting specific information so that the videos online will be, you can see them in advance. But the 4 parts are here. We're going to talk really quickly, sort of a high-level overview and an introduction to the newcomers' activities. Then we're going to talk about the structure of the IETF, and then we're going to talk about the meeting week, and then we're going to talk about additional resources that would be helpful. So I introduced myself. I actually wanted to also introduce my co-presenter, Rich, who can introduce himself actually.
Sure. Hi. I assume that works. My name is Rich Sauls. I've been also involved in the IETF for a really long time, and have had a couple of different working group chairs. Got involved in what's now Emodir, Education, Mentoring, and Outreach. A few years ago, have been co-presenting this tutorial for several years. The last couple have obviously all been virtual. So it's nice to see people. Even we can only see half the face, but thank you.
Yes. So also, if anybody is interested in helping with the Emodir activities, we'll ask again at the end, but any feedback you have on information that you might have missed or things that would help you sort of find your way around the IETF, please be sure, because that all helps us make those activities improvement. Next slide. Oh, they're right there. I don't know why I'm looking backwards. So anyway, the scope of this presentation is specifically to help you prepare for this meeting and to make this meeting or your general introduction to the IETF the most effective. This presentation does not include things like the history of the IETF or how to write a standard or even how it touches on how to bring new work to the IETF, but there's a lot more information. Obviously, we really just wanted to give you a snapshot to get you started, give you some pointers as to where to go, and then hopefully from there, you'll find the information that you need. Next slide. There we go. So the first thing that you will have seen this when you registered, actually, even. So the note well is the general set of policies and rules that the IETF follows. If you have, you need to at some point read through these, and if you go to the next slide, it's this plus the list of policies that are referenced. I should probably begin to anticipate when I'm going to change and give you a heads up. No. We lost the connection. Do you have a network? Un momento.
Okay.
I can tell you there's a list of BCPs on this next thing, and it covers things like our anti-harassment policy, our intellectual property processes.
This is not allowed. All right. Let me do it. Why did it change this?
I'll just do it.
Okay.
Hold on one second. No, it's not. That's not their problem.
your browser stopped. Yeah, quick screen share on. Yeah. Yeah. I'll put that on.
Okay, so now we return you to where we were. This is the list of best current practices, or BCPs, that we have. It includes the things like the oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm going to ask the dumb question if you
No.
could define BCP for us.
Best current practice. So just as a slight tangent, if you look at the IETF types of documents, we have standards track, we have informational, we have experimental, and sometimes a draft will be labeled as a best current practice. It might be a best current practice about a technology, or it might be a best current practice for how the IETF operates. So anyhow, so that's our list of policies. If you go to the next slide. So these specifically are the newcomer activities for this IETF. This is the newcomers overview tutorial, which you are currently attending. There is a quick connections today at 4 o'clock. There is a sign-up process for that. We strongly encourage you to attend that. It's sort of like a quick meeting with a bunch of IETFers. So you walk around a room and you spend a few minutes talking to some experienced IETFers, and then you move on to another group. We've had pretty good success with that. Tomorrow evening, we have a newcomers dinner. That's also a sign-up. You should have gotten an email about that. If you're not getting the newcomers emails, I strongly encourage you to see the lady in purple at the front of the room. She didn't know I was going to point her out, but there she is. She's going to be helping with some of the newcomer activities going forward. And so if you're not getting the newcomer emails, please see Michelle. There is a remote newcomers coffee break. One of the things that we're really struggling with, as are a lot of activities, is how to blend our in-person and our remote attendees, and how to make the experience beneficial for both of them. And I will have to admit, I think we're struggling a bit with the remote. We really aren't quite exactly sure how to best serve the remote newcomers. So we do plan to have a coffee break for them and for you all, for those of you who are remote, in Gather. And there's more details in that in the newcomers email that you should have received. We're going to do an on-site newcomers feedback session on Thursday morning. There will be a little bit of food there, so you can come for that. And then we're going to do a remote newcomers feedback session, and it's not just for remote people, but we're just going to do a follow-up session that's going to be online, strictly online, and we'll do that in the next couple of weeks, and we'll get that scheduled and sent out. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Rich, and he's going to talk about the structure of the IETF.
Okay, take a breath. Thanks. Next. All right, so the mission of the IETF, we have a mission statement like everybody does these days. We want to make the internet work better. And what that means is we want to produce high quality, technically relevant documents. That means technically relevant means if somebody has an idea on how to get more effective use of car braking systems, that's probably not relevant to the IETF. But it does cover a fairly wide area. For example, there's a recent flurry of activity about drones. The little flying things that people record the videos on, because the FAA is interested in identifying them securely, being able to control them, keep them away from sensitive areas like airports and so on. So people in the IETF are working on DRIP, Drone Remote Identification Protocol. It involves some interesting cryptography challenges, how you fit a signature into a small packet that can be sent over radio, things like that. And we want to influence the way people design, use, and manage the internet. In the past, that was more of a selling job, but now there are people, pardon me, other organizations recognize that if you want to do something
internet related and it's a technical protocol, this is the place to be. So newcomers, welcome. Next slide. So we are what's called an SDO, a Standards Development Organization. We're different than many other SDOs. Lots of them, for example, ISO or OSI, depending on how you want to abbreviate it. There's membership is based on your country of origin, and it's paid membership. The IETF, anybody can join. All you have to do is sign up on this website called the Data Tracker, datatracker.ietf.org or dt.ietf.org. Everyone here, if you registered, you already had an account. You already created an account. Self-selected membership is based on individuals. So you don't see things like when the C++ standard is reviewed, the vote tallies are China says yes, US says yes, Russia says abstains, and so on. It's by individuals. We also don't vote, and we'll talk about that a little later. But we do have consensus. Our goal is rough consensus, which means that we want to make sure that everyone's had a chance to say, but not that everyone's voice has been heard, but not that everyone gets to veto every single decision. The primary driver, yeah. Yeah, please. A couple of ways. See Lee, the woman in white. The membership fee, there's no membership fees, right? You join the IETF by subscribing to mailing lists of the groups you're interested in. The conference fees pay for some of it. We get significant grants from the Internet Society because the Internet Society knows that without the IETF, the Internet is much less of a thing. And now the IETF is a legal entity underneath the Internet Society, but a separate legal entity in terms of tax. And Lee is in the development, is the development organization, which is responsible for, seeking grants. If you look on the banners that are hanging up around the place, you'll see several companies recognized. Oracle contributes money to help fund sustainability. My company, and I forget the other one, diversity and inclusion. So if you have we have on-site childcare, which is funded out of that. So it's corporate contributions. The global sponsors are people who've signed up for significant contributions to host the IETF meetings, which are 3 times around the world per year, and made significant contributions to fund that. Answer your question? Great.
The one thing I would just mention is, and not about funding actually, but about process. And this I almost hate to do this, but for the rest of the meetings this week, if you have any questions, if you can go to the queue and put yourself in the queue in this room, and this is a friendly group, a friendly introduction to newcomers event. But the way the other meetings will work is you'll need to get in the queue in order to ask any questions. So I hesitated to do that, but I think you're smiling behind your mask.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The video system we use we call it MeetEcho. It's by a company called MeetEcho. It's very well integrated into the IETF processes, and even so remote. That's what you use. It's a browser-based application. Online, there's the online, in-person version, which is MeetEcho Lite. It doesn't bother doing the video and the audio because you're here in the room. But in the upper left-hand corner, there's like a raise your hand icon. And so if you want to speak at any of the other sessions, you click on the raise your hand, and the chairs up front here will manage the queue, because that same queue is also for people who are watching it remotely. Okay, next slide, please. So the big picture, the IESG, you may have heard that term, also the term area directors. These are the people responsible for steering the technical direction of the IETF, as in what the different working groups do and work on, creating new working groups and so on, that process. They also approve the decisions for where we meet. The IRSG, related to the Internet Tech Task Force, IETF, there's the Internet Internet Research Task Force, and they have similar kinds of meetings. They're all co-located here. If you register and attend an IETF meeting, you can attend any of the IRTF sessions. And so there are things there about privacy, how you measure the global consumption of the, global use of the internet and things like that. The Internet Architecture Board is sort of an oversight committee. They handle the liaison program. So there are lots of organizations that liaison with the IETF. ISO ITU has interactions, they define new signature schemes, working with NIST, post-quantum. That stuff all has particular liaisons. Many of the IETF protocols don't use, we've outgrown ASCII, so now we use Unicode. And so there's a particular person associated who liaisons with the Unicode consortium to make sure that what we're doing is okay and so on. And we just lost the net again. One of the other things the IAB does is they organize workshops. They've announced two. One that's coming up will be announced soon is on sustainability and the applicability of, what happens, sustainability within the IETF and the internet. How do things change when we all are doing Zoom rather than flying all around the world to attend places? I'm glad it's not just me. Well, I'm not glad, but
Yeah, that's right.
Again, sorry.
all right. I'll mention the list. I'll mention the areas while we
Yeah.
get back up to speed. The technical side of the IETF is divided into 7 main areas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so the every working group, which is where the bulk of the technical work happens, falls under a particular area. Very, very rarely, a working group will be the responsibility of 2 areas, but the largest parceling of working groups is in areas, and these are the 7 of them. I won't read the list. That's why the network crashed. I won't read the list. This is not that bad, but we would call this an eye chart, right? Because you got to sit there and try to make out all things. But if you go to the data tracker site, you can find the list of areas. Next slide. IETF and consensus. So we work by consensus, rough consensus, and running code. That's one of the aphorisms that the IETF likes to use to describe itself. As I mentioned before, rough consensus doesn't mean that every objection has been mollified, but that every objection has been heard. Rough consensus, all of this issues addressed. Dissenting opinions are heard but not controlling, and we do humming. Like every other thing in the IETF, it's documented in an RFC. RFCs originally stood for request for comments. It dates back 30 years, back when the U.S. Department of Defense was doing things, and some grad student said, well, here's the way the computer will talk to the gateways. What do we call it? Let's put it out as a request for comments. And so we like to still keep that sense of history. Humming is the way we do it. So we can do a sort of a practice hum here so you can see how it works. When it's all remote, there's a tool in the Meet Echo thing that lets you, hum yes or no. But the humming has its advantages. You can't tell who's humming generally, especially not when people are masked. You can't control the sound, but it's really hard to hum very loud. And you typically the chairs will ask, a 3-part question. Do you think we should adopt this document? Do you not think we should adopt this document? Are you unable to decide? So, for example, we can say, we'll do a 3-part hum. Do you like Karen more than me? Do you like me more than Karen, or are you not ready to decide yet? So hum now if you prefer Karen to me. Okay? Hum now if you prefer me to Karen. I'm crushed. Hum now if you can't decide. All right, so we can all hear that in the room. That was clearly the consensus. By the end of the meeting, maybe we'll do it again. Okay, next. Wait. Okay, next slide. I'll just point out I have candy. Okay, so let's talk about the week. Yeah, I'm not above it. I have my suitcase upstairs, but okay. So the week, we're still obviously feeling our way through a lot of this stuff. This is the second time we've had both in-person and remote attendance. We call it, obviously everyone, we call it a hybrid meeting. So there's probably still a little rough edges. But the core of the meeting this week, and most of the work starts Monday through late afternoon Friday, are working group sessions. The IETF is divided into working groups. There's about 130 of them, everyone grouped into an area. My particular focus is on security, for example. There are also what's called birds of a feather sessions, BOFs. They are like, well, let's get together and see, and maybe if there's enough interest, we'll propose a new working group in a particular area. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it doesn't happen. I think you're leading a BOF, right, on Jose, on signatures in JSON-based signatures. I forget the name, but that's close enough. You can find them, they're all listed in the agenda. Sometimes it doesn't. We had a BOF that was like, let's discuss internet file systems. Think things like Dropbox, Google Drive, and so on. And the conclusion at the end of that was, well, we don't have anything to contribute, and none of the people like Dropbox and Google Drive are here. So we could do a spec, but nobody would use it. And that goes against one of our core tenets, which is the best specifications of those that are used. There are area-wide sessions, the biggest area being the plenary, Latin word meaning all of us. That's for administrative stuff. The different groups that I mentioned at the beginning, the IESG, the IAB, will present about what's new. The corporate parent, the IETF Limited Liability Corporation, called the LLC, will present on the finances. Nominating committee, of which I am the chair, will say, hey, you should try out for these positions and things like that. Sometimes there's a technical presentation, not this time. There are also, there's a social event that is at the Barnes Museum, the world's largest collection of Renoir, Cézanne, I forget, it's both the same. Tickets are available when you registered. If you don't have one, you can post on the mailing list saying, anybody got a spare social ticket? Common use of the attendees list. The IRTF meets, those are research-focused things on things like privacy, cryptographic research. What do we do about post-quantum crypto? A lot of cryptographers are involved in the IETF. There's a hackathon, which was mainly yesterday and is winding down today. So next time around, consider coming earlier. If you have code that implements some of the IETF specs, bring it, work with your colleagues, competitors, and make sure everything interoperates. It's a great event. It's free with your IETF registration. You get a second t-shirt. It's cool. Tutorials, deep dives. There's I forget when it is, but there is a technical presentation by our host on Tuesday. Hot RFC, in this case, deliberate, but RFC stands for Request for Conversation. The host of that is remote. People have videotaped a 10-minute presentation that says, I think we should figure out how to do signatures so cars can talk to each other so they don't crash. They'll present for a few minutes. If you're interested, you go out and follow up with them afterwards. It's very kind of neat. There's side meetings, which are after the regular sessions where anybody can sign up in the mailings. If you look, there's a wiki where people can sign up and say, I want to have a side meeting to talk about whatever it is that might be of interest. It's sort of like a informal BOF, but not really. Then there's open time between the sessions. There's, we serve the breakfast. I'm disappointed. It's more than just starchy old pastries, but during breakfast, what's called the hallway track, right? You can bump in and meet people and talk to them. And that's a very important part and beneficial part of the face-to-face meetings. Next. The working group sessions. This is a picture from the before times, right? We can see the back of everyone's head, but nowadays everyone is masked. Most work is done on mailing lists. Every working group, like I said, there's over 100 of them, has its own mailing list. Just join, read for a while. If you go to the data tracker site, dt.ietf.org is the shorthand name, you can search for a working group and see what documents they're working on. You can subscribe to the mailing list. You can search the mailing list and find comments that people have made. Once you're caught up to speed and feel comfortable talking about something because you've read the documents or you've read previous drafts, feel free to speak up using the Meet Echo tool or post on the mailing list. Okay. No problem. Most of the work is done on the mailing list, and what's different about IETF meetings, working group meetings, from many other standards organizations, is someone will stand up and there's slides, which will be just a bullet list, but without the picture, because it's all just text. Here's what changed since the last time. Boom, 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 boom. Here's an open issue that we still have to resolve. 4 or 5 bullets, or 2 or 3 bullets. If you don't know what happened last time, then you're going to be lost. So one good way, an important way to prepare for the working groups that you're interested in is look through the documents, skim them, skim the ones that you're most interested in, so that when somebody stands up and speaks, in some cases at a very, very rapid clip, unfortunately. Okay, so what we did last time is we changed the packet size from 128 to 256, okay? Yeah, sure. But anyhow, it's a presentation of the diffs of what happened, what changed, and the things that are now open issues that the working group has to decide about. The sessions are all streamed and recorded using the Meet Echo tool. In addition, they are also available on our YouTube channel after the fact, and it takes a couple days to upload everything. The working group, what the working group works on is called the charter, and that is negotiated with the relevant area director and the working group chairs. Next. Birds of a feather session, person's not masked, but usually a working group has a BOF first, and they will say things like working group forming BOF or non-working group forming BOF. There's probably a discussion of the proposed charter, what's interested, and let's see who shows up at that meeting, and they're scheduled during the regular IETF sessions, just to see who's interested and if it's worth trying to progress. And it's up to the area directors approved by the IESG to make those decisions. BOF meets once. IRTF, the folks here, the young men here, one of the things the IRTF does is give out a prize for the best networking oriented paper. So there's one coming up on fingerprinting, I think this year, how you can tell what a site is doing by looking at the order in which the records appear in TLS, as I recall. Another is on looking at the various costs, CPU costs of encrypting DNS protocols. DO, DOC, DOT. Weird. IRTF meets during part of the regular IETF session. The IRTF open session is where the best research papers are presented, and they get, accommodations to come and a stipend. And usually it's graduate students, right, working, and so $1,000 means a lot to them. There is a primer, RFC 7418, that explains what the IRTF does, but you can sort of catch it up by context. Next.
Can I just
Yeah.
Can I just interject one thing here? When you're looking at the schedule, you'll see the research groups. This week, you will also see ANRW, which is the Advanced Network and Research Workshop. Those have been papers that have been selected to come. So it's a parallel activity to the IETF that's generally done once a year, and it's on the agenda this week. It's also done in conjunction with the IRTF. So I would look for both of those for potential research topics. And I just wanted to be sure that that was
Right.
clear.
Yeah, and the ANRW is actually an ACM workshop, so it's got, real credentials, and presumably it's a lot harder to get papers done.
Right. And the ANRP, the prize where they present their work, that's papers that have already been published in other venues that are then nominated as a topic that might be of interest to the IETF. And I don't remember when the call for that is, but every year there's a call and a set of nominations. And I think we have an ANRP presenter in here for this. So, but anyway, so if you are an academic, in addition to using the ANRW as a means to present your work, to publish your work, you can also present work that you've published elsewhere through the ANRP. ANRP.
Right. ANRP, ANRW, the IETF loves its TLAs, FLAs. Okay. No, wrong direction. Okay. The area-wide sessions. So almost many areas have, pardon me, a session for all of the groups to come within their area. They will, and there's two kinds. There is the general area session, so they'll be like transport. Here's where each of the working groups gives a 2-sentence summary of what's happened or what will be happening at their thing. And then there's also dispatch. There might be an invited speaker sometimes. Then there's also dispatch. There's various dispatch groups where somebody comes up and says, this is something in the transport area. I have a new version of how gateways talk to each other. Where should I go with it? And the dispatch, the people who go to the dispatch, the transport dispatch or the art applications dispatch or the SEC dispatch for security will figure out, and they can make a couple of decisions. One, an area director should just support it. We should consider creating a whole new work group, or, oh, well, you're new to the IETF with new work and you probably didn't realize that this group over here is working on gateway interactions. So you go to them and see if they want to work on, adopt your draft. Plenary, as I said, is the whole group. It meets a lot of administrative stuff. A lot of, here's the financial breakdown. Here's the country breakdown of attendees. Here's how it compares to the previous time. Lots of interesting administrivia, I guess is the term. Invited lunch talks. There's a part of the Emodir has a working group chair lunch for all of the working group chairs to get together and talk and say, well, this is a problem. One thing the IETF has done, for example, in the past couple of years is much more embracing of GitHub, the open source platform. And so there's often discussion about how to handle that. There is, as you might expect, an RFC on how to use GitHub, but GitHub is one of the places where developers congregate. So we want to be where the developers are to get their feedback and so on. Next. Hackathons. So this was, again, pre-pandemic picture. They also do it remote during the week, but it's a place to work on new protocols. Quick, a secure transport protocol. They had several hackathons where people were working on different versions of the draft, and they want to make sure by the time the RFC is done that A, it's possible to implement this thing. B, it's not crazy stupid and doesn't require all of your CPU to just ship a packet. And C, that it works across a whole bunch of different implementations. TLS did the same thing. DNS is doing the same thing. So there's a lot. Right now, there's a research project going on about how you do multicast, where you can do point-to-point or you can do broadcast everybody on the net. But over the general internet, you want to be able to do multicast. For example, let me send one copy of the packets for this movie to an entire apartment building because they're all watching it. Or a major sporting event, the Premier League, the US Super Bowl, because everybody's watching it. So it's much more efficient for me to just send it once. Next. The hackathon, anyone can attend. You get free food, another free t-shirt. The idea is to flesh out things, and everybody brings what they do back to their respective working groups. And there's often a mini presentation within the working group that says, hey, here's what happened in the past few days. We do get developers. We get many people who come only for the hackathon because it's zero cost. We get a lot of academics or students. It's a mix of people, veterans, newcomers, and so on. It's a really good time. And it's held the weekend, yesterday and today. So too late, but next time. And there's an RFC coming out that describes how to run one of these things. You might expect. Social events. On the left side, the big blue was held at the Singapore National Aquarium. It was kind of cool. There was no sushi served, but there was plenty of fish to look at. On the right is, I really wanted to do stand up. No, on the right is the Sisters event for women at the IETF, a local community, a community of people, of women support. Because if as you can tell, obviously in tech, they're not as well supported. There's more. Side meetings, we haven't figured out quite the agenda. They're not official IETF meetings, but they should follow the same rules. They're not streamed video unless someone opens up their laptop and uses their own Zoom, Meet, Google Meet, Discord, BlueJeans, WebEx. I think I can name them all the ones I know about, or all the ones that are on my machine. But they're not officially part of the IETF multimedia experience. There is a deep dive on Quick Tuesday morning, I guess before breakfast is served. And then there's a blog post that talks about new topics that are new to the IETF this time, and so on. And I think I'm done. Oh, meeting etiquette. Okay. It really helps to read the documents of the groups you're interested in. You can also just sit back and listen, and maybe you'll be lost sometimes. Integrated with MeetEcho is the Zulip chat system. It's a text instant messaging system like Jabber or Slack, but different and better. We want to be respectful and tolerant of everybody. We don't want to, we want to make sure everyone feels welcome and able to contribute. We're judged solely based on, your technical contributions. Have a good time. It's a real pain to walk around masked all the time, go out, get some fresh air, and then realize, whoa, it's way too hot out there, and come back inside. Okay. Yeah, so the online version, you can't quite see it, but there is that, raise your hand. So in any of the other sessions, if you want to talk, you can ask questions while someone's presenting. Generally, people will present. There's an agenda with time limits. Then there will be a time for general question and answer, or things like, hey, did you consider that motorcycles need to be able to avoid cars too? Going back to hypothetical example, the local version turns off the audio and video. Remote, use headsets, sort of all of the standard video conferencing things that we've gotten too tired of. Technical comments and questions are welcome. Don't say, I couldn't hear you with the mask. Try to speak slowly. State your name when you speak, and you'll come up to the mic when the chair recognizes you, because people taking the minutes don't know everybody's name. It's especially hard to hear with them, recognize somebody with the mask on. There's an integrated chat. That's also gatewayed to and from the Zulip chat system, so that there's text messaging available. Sometimes it's a snarky back channel. Sometimes it's a really good place to ask clarifying questions of the room. It all depends on the working group. Briefly, how to bring new work. Before you have a BOF, even before you can just go to someone. Hey, I'm really concerned about this. It might be worth writing up something, a draft. Every document in the IETF starts out, and we call it an internet draft, ID, or generally a draft. Drafts are the product of working groups. You can submit an individual draft, all done through the data tracker. If you go to the authors.ietf.org website, there is some tutorial information on how to format your document and the tooling available to sort of get it all nice and pretty and make the HTML look good, or the PDF, or what have you. There's a tutorial online. You can see it there on the links. These slides will be available, and also you can find out how. We have a question? Is that what that means?
It means that Carl is in the queue. Is Carl clear or remote? Come on, join the queue.
Yeah,
Excellent. I was hoping somebody would demonstrate this.
right.
Yeah, hi, Carl Klasky. I partially wanted to try it and make sure it worked for the real meetings. But my other quick question is there anyone around for in-person help on the data tracker account? Apparently I had an account from a few years back and had IDs linked to it, but then my email changed and I'm
Gotcha.
sure I messed it. Is
Sure.
there anybody around?
There is a,
Yeah, but do they have does the tools team generally doesn't have
well,
it?
I would start with, and it's a little bit later in there, there's an email address, support@ietf.org. You send an email to that, it addresses a bunch of issues like things like your account.
Oh, okay.
And if that doesn't solve it, then there's a separate data tracker bug. But what you're talking about is not really a bug, it's an authentication issue.
Yeah.
So all meeting issues go to support@ietf.org.
Yeah. Okay. And now we know the queue works and well.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Next.
Oh, wait, I'm on the wrong, hold on a second.
Long down arrow.
Oh, so now it's me.
Okay.
So I'm doing the fourth part of this, which is basically a whole bunch of resources and information, pointers to groups of people that would be useful, and you're going to have to advance my slides. Go backwards one. So first of all, just a short word about IETF participants and culture. It's a very passionate vocal culture, but don't be shy. Be sure to ask questions because we are all here to help. Technical excellence is highly valued. So if you're working in a field and you see some issues, be sure to speak up. A number of us, as you've already figured out, it's informal dress code. So it's definitely not a coat and tie place. And a lot of people here have been working with each other for a long time. And you'll notice that over time, people who participate in the IETF will move companies, but they'll still maintain their IETF participation as they're moving from company to company. So it's a culture that we're fairly proud of. It's also a culture that we are trying to improve by being sure that we are as inclusive and positive as we can be, because sometimes the world is a negative place. Next slide. So with that caveat, we do have an ombuds team, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit later. We do have an anti-harassment policy. If you are at all concerned about any behavior that you witness or experience in the IETF, there's sort of like 4 levels that you can go through. The first one is you can speak to the working group chairs in the working group that you are concerned about, or you can go to the area directors. And then Lars Eggert is the general chair of the IETF. And then beyond that, we have the ombuds team. If you go to the next slide. I really should put the ombuds team is later in here, and I really should move it so it's right after that slide. This is what happens when you look at the slides, but you don't actually present them. So Jay Daly is the executive director of the IETF, so he's responsible for all the administrative side of the house and keeping everything in operations. Next slide. The IETF Secretariat, they are the staff that are the event planners and do all the basic logistics and keep us all in cookies and in t-shirts and in rooms with all of the things that they do. There will be a registration desk that's staffed all week that'll have people there that can ask any questions of. They are super helpful, and they're always there for a friendly smile if you need one, which sometimes one does need. Next slide. I did not double check to make sure. In the pre-pandemic times, there were two tables. One would be the RFC editor staff, and one would be the IANA staff, and they would be down somewhere in the general area of the registration desk. These are two functions that are key to the work of the IETF. The RFC editor obviously publishes all of our documents. So if you're trying to get a document through and you need to talk to somebody about some issue that you're having, you can go up to their desk and ask them. And then also the IANA staff manages all of your protocol number assignments. So, if you want to register a number, you're going to have to go through IANA. You have to have an IANA considerations section in any RFC that you might be writing. And so you would go and speak to the IANA staff. You can also contact them on email, but sometimes if you're here and in person, just walking up and talking to somebody and at least putting a face to a name for the staff would be really helpful. They will have office hours. Thank you. Both groups will have office hours, so you'll find their tables downstairs, and I should have double checked that. Next slide. So this is the Ombuds team, the slide which I will move up in the presentation. So these are three long-term IETF participants, and they're sort of your final arbiters to go to report any behavior that you're not happy with, or in any way in which you feel like you're witnessing or experiencing harassment in the IETF. And even if you just want to talk to them about, I'm not sure how to deal with this. It's not necessarily a formal complaints process. It's a set of resources to go and talk to see about how you might improve something. Next slide. So the IETF Sisters. This got mentioned before. This is a group for women and people that identify as women or non-binary. And the website is there. It's really a very informal group of people. We do get together during the IETF and have lunch, and I think we have a sisters networking event this week, which is also on the calendar. And there's a mailing list. So the number of us have been participating for a long time, and it's just a friendly group of people as a resource to go to. Next slide. Data tracker. You've heard Rich mention data tracker a lot this week. If there's one thing that you need to learn, one place you need to get to for the IETF, it's the data tracker, because it has all of the resources associated with the working group. It has all of the meetings, it has all the materials, and I put the TLS working group up here, and you can't really see it in there, but if you look at the tab across the top, right underneath the transport layer security, it says about, and then documents and meetings and something I can't read, and photos and email and the list archive. So it has all of the artifacts associated with the working group. And if you go to the About tab, it'll give you who the chairs are, what the charter is, any additional resources that they might have identified. So, and this tool has evolved quite a bit in the last few years. And in fact, the code sprint portion of the IETF is the tools team basically all getting together and doing some extra work on the data tracker. It's getting much better. It's highly tailored to the work of the IETF. There is a bug reporting system, and there is a tools team, so you can even follow along in the work that they're doing if you're interested in that. But if you really want to get into the work of the IETF, you need to spend a little bit of time getting familiar with the data tracker. Next slide.
Increasing people in the queue. I don't know how you want.
Oh, I think you can take people to the. I guess we'll just go ahead and assume you're. Are you John?
I'm John.
Oh, hi, John.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the tools team has office hours, or if we can ask them questions, because the tools are, yeah.
I don't know if they have office hours, but wait, somebody is that an? Oh, that's a really good idea. Yeah, they're at the hackathon. Under the sign that says, I think it says Code Sprint, right? It says Code Sprint. That's the tools team. Excellent. Robert? Oh, I'm sorry, Lena. I'm sorry. I just looked at the second yellow box. Excellent.
Hi, I'm Lena Chaponier. You mentioned the sisters organization and the networking event on Tuesday. Is it something that you have to join and pre-register for, or you can just show up and attend the event?
Um, you know, we have historically had a sign up, but I haven't seen one this time. But I do know there's a sister's lunch. So I think there's 2 on the agenda. So I would say just show up. But I would join the mailing list. Right. And there's a lunch on Thursday, right? Yeah, there's a lunch on Thursday. That's the one I always remember. So I would show up this week. If it is a sign up, we can always put one more person in. It's just for catering purposes. So, Robert.
Yes, thank you. When I was preparing, I found an iOS app called IETFers, and I downloaded it, but it seems to be pointing back at an older meeting. Is it a newer version?
I don't
No,
know.
the mobile stuff is
I-
taking a hiatus, let's say. So yeah, you don't,
Thank you.
yep.
Yeah, I think it's working.
Okay,
No, not
I'll
for
check.
Android.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Yeah,
apparently it is working on iOS, but us Android users are out of luck.
Yeah, I think you need, she's right. I believe you have to select the new meeting. I'll have to admit, I haven't actually looked this time. I usually have it up by now, but I haven't done it this time. I thought there was somebody else in the queue, but so the next person, the next slide is Meet Echo. So all of as you know, IETF we really like our custom tools. And so the next custom tool that we have is the conferencing system that we have. It is web-based, and it is run by a small team of gentlemen that are in the NOC. There is an additional page that gives you lots of information about Meet Echo. For those of you on site, you're not really going to be using the full Meet Echo. You're going to be using the version on your phone that just checks you in and puts you in the queue. And there are also practice sessions for any of you that are remote that you can use. If you go to the next slide. The IETF network, you've probably also seen, like, I don't know, there might be 8 or 9 SSIDs that we have now. We do have our own network here that we run. We deploy wireless for all of the meeting rooms, and then we provide, we don't provide, we don't substitute out the APs that are in the hotel, but what we do is we get the hotel to add our SSID on there, and then it uses our uplink. So we do have a full network team here. There is a printer along with the help desk that is usually staffed by 1 or 2 of the NOC guys, 1 floor down. So if you need to print anything, or if you have any network or technical questions related to the network, you can stop and see them. And that was a picture of them right before their morning meeting this morning. Next slide. So there's some additional resources. You've already probably, in the newcomer's email that you received, gotten the link to all of the newcomer information. There's also a TAO of the IETF, which goes on, has a ton of information. There's all of the main meeting mailing lists are there. There's a one-stop shop for all of the links. And I mentioned this when the person asked earlier, but if you have any meeting issues, the email is support@ietf.org. It's a ticketing system, and it'll get sent to whoever needs it, whether it's an authentication issue or a, whatever kind of issue you might have. Next slide. I think I'm done. Above all, I hope you enjoy the meeting. If you have any questions, be sure to ask. And then go to the next slide. And questions or feedback. What did we miss? Come to our feedback sessions or send us email, because our objective here is to make your entry into the IETF as seamless as possible. And with that, if there are no more questions, thank you all for attending. And we finished with 1 minute to spare. Thanks.
Yeah, you can't tell that we've done this before.
So the second lost presentation. Apparently, you log in on your phone.
Oh, Meet Echo only allows you 1 login. Got it. Yes. I actually tried to do that like watching two different sessions at one time. Like, nope, can't do that.
Yeah, can't do that.
Okay.
So
All right.
so that was lesson one, and yours, I think you,
I lost network. The network with some.
your browser was getting slower and slower. That's why I was wondering if you also had something else.
Unless I didn't kill the Docker instance running the tools.
And before I forget, we can move this right now because you know you don't see it until you talk it through. And I'm like, that's really stupid. The LMS team should be right next to that. That makes a lot more sense. So I think I got most of the links updated.
Okay.